Hi, everyone, and welcome to our week 3 pre-recorded lecture for DES 114, Print Production and Color Theory. I'm Shannon McNamara. I'm an instructor and an FPA here at Independence University. So I think that this week is going to be a really fun lecture series. I hope that you do too. We have a couple of cool things. I have some cool demos that I'm going to do with you to go over. We're going to talk a lot about the printing process, and then I really want to get in and start to dissect those trifolds that we're going to be making this week. So let's talk a bit about the printing process. There's quite the process when it comes to getting one of our print jobs, from design to finished piece from our printer. And we want to go over, each of the different portions of this process, the different steps that we need to go through, to ensure that our design comes back from the printer exactly how we envision it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to define our project. What is it that we're having done? So a good example for this week would be to say that we are creating a trifold. We're creating maybe a takeout menu. Let's use that as an example to define our project. We're creating a takeout menu this week. And so what I want to do is I want to define that project. I want to gather all the requirements. I want to budget and schedule. I want to discuss, the output quality, my initial design ideas. These are the conversations that I'm going to need to have with my client. So if my client wants a takeout menu, first thing I need to do when it comes to gathering all the requirements, I need to go and I need to get their logo. I need a good vector version of their logo. And chances are good that if they have printed some things in the past, they probably have that file from a designer or from whoever has made their logo. But sometimes we're going to run into instances where they will hand you a business card that has their logo on it, and they will say to you, this is the only thing that I have. So if that ever happens, this needs to go into our budget. This is a conversation that we're going to need to have with our client, because I am going to have to bring that logo in, scan it in, bring it into Illustrator, and redraw a vector version of their logo for them. So this is going to take my time. So therefore, I'm going to need to charge them for this. We also need to discuss a schedule. When does this menu need to be done? What's the deadline for this? So some of the other requirements I would need for my takeout menu is I need a copy of their menu. What do they have for food there? What is it that they're serving? Do they have maybe a physical menu at the restaurant? Most restaurants would, one of their big menus that maybe they send over to the table with you. And if you need to make a takeout menu for them and they want to mirror exactly that same exact menu, what you would need to do is either ask them, hey, do you happen to have a document file that has your menu in it? Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. If they don't, you're going to have to ask them if you can take one of their physical menus with you so you can type it out. And again, add that typesetting. That's going to need to be added to your schedule. Do they have any pictures that they want to run in their menu? Maybe of their food. Maybe they didn't really think of that. They don't have any pictures. But is that something that you can come out and do for them? Which, if you feel that you're pretty good with a camera, I would highly suggest it. Get out your camera. Even the newer iPhones, they have great cameras on them. That could be something that you could use to go out and take some pictures, take some good quality pictures of their food. And again, you want to make sure when you're gathering each of these requirements, maybe they do have some pictures of their food, but they're not the best quality. Again, another conversation that you're going to want to have with your client. You want to ensure that this printed piece is going to represent them in the best way possible. So when you're discussing, this budget and the schedule and why it is that you're doing the things you're doing, you want to tell them, listen, this takeout menu, some people may have never been to your restaurant before. They don't know the quality of your food. They don't know how good it is here. You need to put forward your best foot to get them in the door. That means having a nice, high quality, professional looking logo because it makes you seem more reputable. That means having nice, well shot, high quality images of your food. And what I would do, and I've done this before, is set up a time with the owner and say, what are some of your best dishes? Or what are some of the dishes that are maybe some of your more high-end dishes that you really want to push to get people to order because it has a higher price point for you? Let's make some of those dishes and we'll come in and we'll shoot them very professionally, on a nicely set table. Maybe you can get some of your staff, or maybe even you as the designer can get some of your friends, dress them up nicely, have them come in, pretend to be diners, and do a little impromptu photo shoot. I've done a couple of those. Number one, it's fun. And number two, you get so much free food out of it usually when you do that. It's definitely worth it. Next, what you're going to want to do is, again, all of these little things that you're going to need to do, that's going to have to go into your schedule. If they need this menu and they really want it done by next week, you might not have time to do a photo shoot. Maybe you can come, a really well-staged photo shoot. Maybe you can come in one night and they'll comp your meal and you can try to order a couple of things off the menu so you can shoot them yourself at the table. Again, work with your client and figure out when it is that they need these things done and try to get it all put together. Also, value your own time when you are coming up with your budget. Your time is worth something. If it's going to take you an extra 2 hours to redraw their logo, you need to add that to your budget. Your time is worth it. The same with doing this photo shoot. Sure, you might get some free food out of it, but this is still your time. Think of what they might, think of what it is that you would want to charge an hour for your design services and put that into the budget, because now you are coming in and you're replacing a professional photographer that they might spend a couple of $100s on. So, you want to wrap this all up into your price. You want to also discuss, all right, what type of paper do you want your menu printed on? Do you want a glossy stock of paper? Maybe a heavier card stock of paper? Again, this is all going to go into that budget and what that price point is going to be. Talk about how they want it folded. Explain, show them a couple of the different fold options that there are out there. Bring in some examples. If you are working with a vendor that you normally work with, ask them if you can borrow their paper book to bring with you to show the different options. If you're constantly working with the same print vendor and they happen to be local, chances are good that they'll say to you, oh yeah, take the paper book with you. We try to push this stock. It's a little bit more expensive, but you can definitely tell the difference in the feel. You can sell things better if you have things to show when you go in. So you want to be prepared for this process before you even get there. Think of all of the different things that you're going to need from your client. Make yourself a checklist. Think of the different things that you want to show your client and make sure that you have them with you. If you have some initial design ideas, maybe, you've eaten at that restaurant many times before and you've sat down with their physical menu at the table, and you say to yourself, I just don't feel like their menu matches the feel or the aesthetic of this place. You know, give them some of your design ideas for that takeout menu, and maybe that can turn into you doing more marketing pieces, redesigning some of the pieces that they might already have in their restaurant. These are all great ideas. You're their idea person. All right, so now that you've gotten everything together, you know that you're going to be doing an 8.5 by 11 trifold menu, and it's going to be mailed through the post office. And they actually do have a vector version of their logo, which is great, but they want you to come in and take some photos. So that way they have some professionally shot photos for the menu. You've talked about a couple of different design ideas, and you know that it's going to be a 4-color job. So, you know, 4/4, which means that it's going to be full color on the front, full color on the back. You know, these are some of the things that you'll really map out with the client how they want it set up. Next, you would select your vendor. You know, if you've worked with a vendor in the past and you feel that they've done a good job, continue to work with them. If you aren't quite sure, you've never worked with a vendor before, you know, start with a quick Google search. Read some recommendations. Try to find someone local if you can. The reason I say this, yes, you might get a better price online. Vistaprint has great pricing, and I've used them many, many times for many, many different jobs. And I think that they do a pretty spot on job. I mean, I've had a couple of instances here or there where I've gotten really nitpicky with the work that I've gotten. And of course, it's always my own personal things. But again, you know, if you have the chance to work with someone local and to start up a good relationship with a local vendor, that's really going to help you to build your business, because they're getting business from you as a graphic designer. There's good chance that they might throw you some business if they have clients who are looking for a designer. So it's a really good matchup that you can make with a printer. Plus, you can go in there, you can physically do a press check. You can physically check things. You can meet with them. You can, you know, go in there and see if you can borrow the paper book if you need to. You know, you can let them know, hey, I have a person who's looking for something really particular. Do you think that this is something that you can do? Like I said, in the past, I have used Vistaprint for lots of things, lots of different jobs, but I had an extremely, two instances of an extremely specific job for business cards that I wanted to get printed. And I went with a local printer who I knew was going to be able to do this. The first card was a matte black. It felt like a credit card. We were going to use it as a business card, however. And then on top of the matte black was a raised glossy black for the type and the logo. So it shined as you held the card in the light. The glossy black against the matte black. It was an extremely specific design and specific print job that I wanted to have done. And I was living in Florida at the time, but I actually, when I say I went through a local vendor, I'm from Massachusetts. I knew the local vendor I wanted to go through, and I called them up and I said, listen, I'm down in Florida, but I have this really specific job that I want done. Do you guys think that this is something that you can handle? And they said, yep. So we worked over the phone, we got it all set up, and you know, it was definitely a pricey job getting that done, but you know, it was something that I knew they could do. It just wasn't something that Vistaprint was going to be able to handle for me, even though they can do, you know, credit cards and print credit card type cards like gift cards. It wasn't going to be black all the way through. They would have just put a black ink over the card and you would have seen that white, you know, edge around the side, and I wanted a true black card with a true glossy black finish. And I've gone through that printer again. This time around, I'm looking for a clear card with a one color cyan print on top of it with a bleed. So it's a one-sided job. When you hold the card up, it's clear, and you just see the text and the logo printed in cyan blue, on this clear card. So, again, a very specific type of job that I needed, but they are able to do those sorts of jobs. So this is why it's so important when you're trying to select vendors that you're aware of what your vendor can handle. And a lot of local places too, they love the challenge of coming up with something cool like that, because it's something that they can showcase that they can do that maybe they didn't think of, until you come to them with that design challenge. So again, you want to evaluate different printers and, the different services that they provide. Between you and your printer, establish a process. What is the turnaround time for them to give you a proof back and get something on the press? Are they going to be able to meet your deadline that you have with your client? If your deadline is 3 weeks from now on a Friday, what is the drop dead deadline that you have to have the files to the printer ready to go? That's part of that process. So if they need the files 6 days ahead of time, so they can get it set up in pre-press and get it over to the press, then you need to establish a process with them where you're going to get that file to them. And if you want to do a press check, understanding what day it's going to go on the press so you can show up to do that press check. Also, you're going to want to choose the elements of the project, the paper and the ink. If you're doing something as specific as I was doing with a clear type credit card or an all black matte credit card, you're going to want to make sure that they have the specific elements to put your project together, that they're able to do that. And again, this is why working with a local vendor sometimes is a little bit easier. I might be able to call up a local vendor, and if they don't have that product, but they think it's a really cool project and they're, they see the potential to make an extra buck there, they might be able to find out where to get the products to print that on for me. Whereas if I call up Vistaprint, I'm going to get one of their 100, customer service reps who's going to say, ooh, sorry, we just don't do that. And it won't go any further. So, you want to know the limits of the different vendors that you have. And again, not to discount using Vistaprint. I use them all the time. Anytime that I need, custom cards made or custom labels made, or, I've had, because I'm a designer, I don't just make birthday cards, I design them and I'll have them printed, and again, they are a great place to have that done, but they might not be the best place if I need something as specific as a clear card with a one spot color cyan on it. Step 3 is pre-press in the design. So again, assign elements of the job. You want to implement the design, craft the project, prep your files for output, and review the design. There's a lot that goes into that. So you have all your pieces. You went and you did your photo shoot. You have those images. You have the logo. You have the vector file of the logo. They were able to find it and send it to you. You have their menu that you physically took from the restaurant that you're going to typeset. So now you're going to sit down at your computer and you're going to start to put all of these pieces together and put this design together. What you need to do, make sure if you are ever typesetting something yourself, that you send it off to your client for review before you send it to the printer. You want to make sure that you have dotted every I, crossed every T. Do not rely on just spell check. Spell check is not going to catch everything for you. You're going to want to make sure that, you know, they sign off on that proof. You know, just to cover your own behind, you know. Put the design together. Give yourself enough time to, you know, to design it, step away from it, look at it again, proof it yourself before you send it off to your client. Make sure that your files, you know, if this is going to be a 4-color job, you've taken those photos, you've converted them from RGB to CMYK, and everything is really ready to go. And then 4, handing it off for a proof. So again, discuss any printing issues that there might be. You're going to send the files to the printer. They're going to send the files to the film, make the plates, and establish a proofing method with you. Are they going to give you a hard proof, which means that they'll give you a printed copy straight off the press for you to look at? Or are they going to send you a PDF file when it's ready to be sent off to pre-press for you to double check that PDF file? You know, there's kind of a couple of different ways that printers will do things, and it's up to you to establish a process with your printer of how you're going to proof that material. And then 5, proof and print it. Again, go there, check the placements of the graphics and the copy. Make sure nothing fell off. You know, sometimes errors happen when things go to pre-press and we don't know why. Review your press proofs and then observe the assembly. Make sure that if it's a printed trifold and it's supposed to be a barrel fold, make sure that you receive a copy of that folded piece and it's folded to your specifications. And if it's not, if something is wrong and you need to speak up. You are the last line of defense for your client before they receive a job that they paid for that is not the way that they expected it to be. So really, really be the eyes and ears of your client. You need to advocate for them. They, you know, a person who owns a restaurant does not know the questions to ask in this instance. That's why they came to you. You probably don't know how to put all their dishes together to make, you know, the wonderful food that they make. They don't know how to put all the pieces together to end up with a takeout menu. You both have your place and your job in this. So make sure that you're doing what you can to be an advocate for your client. So again, defining your project. Make sure that you go over all of the specifications, all the requirements, that budget. You know, how many pieces do you want to have printed? Do you want to start off with 100 takeout menus, 500 takeout menus, 1,000 takeout menus? How long is this takeout menu going to last for? Do you foresee that this is just going to be a takeout menu for the summer season and then you're going to want to do something different in the fall? You know, there's places do that. You know, what is the quality of the paper that you want? Do you want a really high gloss paper that's got a little bit heavier of a heft of a stock to it? You know, schedule when the file needs to be submitted to production, what type of proofs you're going to do, what your revision policy is, and what your delivery policy is going to be. You know, things can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth a million times with the client if you do not set a number of proofs and a number of revisions that they are able to make. And set that up before. Let your client know, like, listen, I will come to you with an initial design and we will have 2 sets of proofs and revisions that we will do. The first, where we can go over if you want things changed in the design. I will then change it, show you another proof. That second proof is not to redesign it, but is to ensure that those changes have been made. If there is an error that I have committed, I will fix it on my end. But again, we aren't using proofs to redesign this takeout menu every single time. This is my process. You know, make sure that you are both on the same page. You know, make sure that they can receive a copy of your proof. If you're sending them a PDF file and they don't know how to open it, you know, that's not going to help. You know, do they need you to print out a copy of their proof and bring it to the restaurant to show them? Some places they might not be computer savvy. And again, go over all those design concepts. Are there any special requirements that they have? Maybe they have a logo that is a Pantone color. Maybe they want to use a Pantone, just a one Pantone spot color in their piece. So again, all of these things go into defining this project. The RFQ and selecting your vendor. So your company or your printer will most likely have a setup for a bid sheet, which is, or a request for a quote. And there's probably some details that may vary, but usually the following information needs to be included in that. Contact information, page count, is there any binding, what type of paper, and what the weight of that paper is. Remember I was saying, do you need a high gloss paper that maybe has a little bit more of a heft? You know, they'll tell you what the different paper stock is. What is the color? You know, is it a 4/0, which means it's one side 4 color, nothing on side 2, a 4/4, 4 colors on, you know, CMYK on side 1, CMYK on side 2. Are there any spot colors? What is the quantity? You know, are they running a menu that they think they're just going to just keep running, so they want 1,000 of them? Or, you know, is this a menu just for the summer season and maybe they want 200? And if they need more, they'll order more. You know, you're going to need to plan out these details with the printer so you know their capabilities. You can also ask for some comparison bids in different materials and quantities and from different vendors. You know, it doesn't hurt to price shop, even if you've been going through the same vendor for a while. You know, if you feel as though you can get a better deal somewhere, but you like this person, give them the opportunity to give you the better deal. And then working with your printer, you know, there's other details that you're going to have to work out in cooperation with your printer. That timeline, can they meet the timeline? What are the deadlines for those file submissions, for the proofs, for the press checks, for the production, and then even the shipping? What if it needs to be shipped out? You know, can they meet that deadline? What is the price per sheet for a complete job? You know, each company has different methods and processes. So this is really only a rough overview. Sometimes you're gonna have to add information later in the process. You know, working with the printer, it's a team effort. It's important to build those relationships through good communication with them. All right, so let's talk a little bit about pagination, imposition, and signature. So your layout program, which is InDesign, that's why we use InDesign as our layout program, it's gonna order your pages as you view them in the finished binding. So that includes a front and back and 2-page spreads. So to utilize both fronts and back of your page in a spine-bound print job, you're going to need to have a multiple of 4 for your page count, or some pages will end up blank. That's just how it needs to be set up. And you'll notice how it sets up page 1, and it'll set up your final page as its own page. That's to show you the front and the back page. So here's why page counts, you know, count for printing and why they are multiples of 4. So during your printing, your pages are printed are large sheets of paper, depending on your book size. So 8, 16, or 32 pages. Those are all multiples of 4. And below, you can see that this is a large sheet of paper known as the parent sheet with 8 pages printed on both sides. So 16 pages total. Then after printing, the sheets are folded and inserted into your book as a whole unit. If your page count was not a multiple of 4, you would be left with blank pages throughout your book. And you can even see this process. So we have a fold here. Here's our second fold. Here's our third fold, and then here's where it would be bound, right here on this left-hand side. We would bind it, and then it's sent to the cutter. And when it's trimmed along this white edge, that's what opens up those pages. So it's, you know, it seems like it's more of a process, but it's really not for them to do it this way. This is one of the easiest ways for them to bind a book. So again, here's a little bit bigger of an image. So you have your large sheet of paper right here, then it's folded in half. So here's fold number 1. Then it's folded down. Fold number 2. Then this is folded like this. Fold number 3. So you have page 1 straight through. Then after all those folds are done, it would be bound right here and cut. This is cut, and when that's trimmed, that opens up your book. Pretty interesting. It's pretty cool to watch it be done too. So it consists in the arrangement of the printed pages on the printer sheet in order to obtain faster printing, simplify binding, and reduce paper waste. Imposition is one of the fundamental steps in the pre-press printing process, and your printer will set this up from your bid and file. That's how they're going to set this up. So again, page 1 and page 16 are near each other. Page 2 is on the other side. Page 15 would be on the other side. Then it would go 3 and 4. And you're moving your way backwards. See? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, next to 8. So you can see where it just keeps moving its way to the center. And again, you can see that perf. Most publications are processed by printing 8 pages on one side of a large paper and then 8 more pages on the other side, which is a 16-page signature. This can vary depending on your page and paper size, and this large sheet is then folded and trimmed, and the resulting set of pages is called a signature. So you can see perf here, but no score here. So to accommodate the slight variations that will happen as the sheet is fed through the printer and the pages are trimmed, this is why we need to set up those pages with the bleed. We go over this every week, right? We're like, why do we need to set this up? Why is the bleed so important? This is why. Your printer will determine what your bleed should be, but it's usually 1/8 of an inch, that 0.125. It's also important that your design allows for the space that the binding is going to take up with the size. So you can see here's a standard size paper. We have that safe zone, which we went over last week when we were discussing our poster. Here's that safe zone. This is the trim size, this red right here. And then this is the bleed, that bluish gray that's showing up right outside of our trim size. So it's so important that we set this up this way. There are a couple of different ways that things can be binded. There's a 3-ring bind, which is exactly what it sounds like. Think of those 3-hole punches that you probably saw in elementary school. I feel like everybody's teacher had a 3-hole punch, or every school had a 3-hole punch somewhere in the office, right? That's a common format for those 3-ring binders, but you can have things printed that way. Next is a spiral. So coils are wound through the top or left margin of the printed pages. You may or may not have ended up with, again, kind of going back to elementary school, some of those workbooks, if you buy notebooks, the cheap notebooks that you can buy, those Mead one subject wide ruled spiral notebooks. Those are the coils holding the paper together. Then you have a saddle stitch, which are 2 or more staples inserted at the fold. So it's not really stitched, it's stapled together. We've probably all worked in workbooks that are set up that way as kids. And then the perfect, which is all signatures put together, then ground down, and the paper cover is glued around the spine. So that's a good example for your paperback book that you have. So again, here's some examples. We have our saddle stitch right there, which is usually for roughly between 8 to 80 pages, because anything more than that is just, the staple's not going to hold it. Then you have your loop stitch. So similar process, 8 to 80 pages. You have a stab stitch or a side stitch. I never like those. I find once you get to the middle of the book, it's hard to keep the pages from closing back up on you. You have a sewn bound. You have the perfect bound, which is, you know, again, your most books that you see, you know, a paperback book. You have a tape bound. This reminds me of those notebooks. I'm trying to think of the name of the brand. The notebooks that have the marble-ish cover to them, and they always had the tape bound. So when you if you tried to rip out a piece of paper, it never came out correctly. It was always kind of a mess if you tried to rip it out. I just can't think of the name of those notebooks, but this is what I think of when I think of tape bound. Then we have a screw bound. I don't think I have ever physically seen a screw bound book. I know that they exist. I just don't think I've ever physically seen one. Then you have your hardcover or your case bound, so a nice hardcover book. A plastic grip, a comb bound or plastic bound. We've probably seen those. A couple of courses that I took in college had books that were printed that way. Your spiral bound again, or coil bound, but this one can be for 16 to 275 pages, and then your wire O bound. So again, it kind of loops through and it attaches with itself. At the end, it's not a continuous loop like the spiral. There's like one loop that comes through and it kind of attaches and attaches and attaches. So some projects might be folded instead of bound, and that also requires you to think carefully about how the different sides of the sheet are going to flow together once they're folded. So the best way to envision this is to actually make a physical mock-up and lay out your documents accordingly. There are templates available that'll help you to lay out a folded printed document. So here are some of the different types of folding. We have a 4-page single fold. So really it's one piece of paper. It's folded in half. You have page 1. On the other side of it's page 2. Here would be page 3. And on the other side of this would be page 4. About as simple as you can get. Think of making when you were a kid and you probably made a card for your parents and you took a piece of construction paper and folded it in half. That is your 4-page single fold. Probably didn't know back then that it had such a fancy name to it, right? Then we have the 6-page concertina fold. Some people call this a Z fold because it looks like the letter Z. So this is a common way that you can do, a trifold in a way, because it's got 3 folds to it. Then you have your 6-page standard gatefold. And you'll notice that I have a star here. We're going to get back to that. Then we have an 8-page angle fold or a French fold. So again, the paper, large piece of paper, it's folded down and then folded in half. Or you have an 8-page parallel double fold. So you can kind of see how the fold goes. You fold it in half, then you fold it in and fold this around it. 8-page concertina fold, just like this. It kind of looks like the letter M when you're done. An 8-page parallel map fold. So it would start here. Here would be a fold. Here would be a fold. Here would be a fold. And this would be your cover. An 8-page gate fold. So again, larger sheets of paper here. You would fold one side into the center, fold this side into the center, and then take both of those and fold it in half. Or a 10-page concertina fold, which again, here's a fold, here's a fold, here's a fold, here's a fold. So going back to this 6-page standard gatefold, this is also commonly known as a barrel fold, and it's an extremely common fold. So I want you to go find any takeout menu that you might have in your house, any one. Chances are good it is probably folded as a barrel fold. Now, when it comes to printing, this is the fun part, picking out the paper. I love paper books. I have worked for many different places where the companies would come in and they would drop off their paper books, and I could just sit there for hours looking at the beautiful paper options, feeling the different weights of paper. You may think it's kind of a bizarre thing, but you know, there's so many different types of paper out there, and there's so many different beautiful paper options. And I think it's so interesting to see different things and how they look when they're printed on those different papers. So if you ever get a chance to, you know, really go to a paper factory or to go to a paper company and see all of the different options that they have, I say do it. There's all different weights, you know, text and cover stock, many different types of measurements. The weight is how heavy the paper is, you know, how thin to how thick it is. There's different colors, you know, more than one color, obviously, white, yellow to white. You can see all of the different, you know, printed, all the different colors here. There's different coatings, uncoated versus a coated, which is more of a glossy stock, versus a, you know, uncoated would be like a matte stock. It's kind of got that roughness. There's different textures on the paper. You know, how textured is your paper? Does it have the little ridges? You know, think of a sketchbook that you might have, a really good sketchbook, you know, and that texture that you have when you run the pencil over it. There are, you know, certain papers like that. There are some that are just smooth as glass. Very, very interesting to kind of feel all the different, you know, all the different papers. And it really is something that you need to pick by feeling, by seeing the difference, you know, by really, really getting in there and you know, observing the different weights, the different colors, the different coats, and the different finishes to find the piece that you want. If you've ever gotten married and you went somewhere to have your wedding invitations done, which is a very expensive business to be in. I did my own wedding invitations because I know how very expensive a business it is to be in. But again, you know, it's fun to pick out the different paper stock and, you know, put all the pieces together that are going to make up the invitation. If you're ever looking for a surefire way to make some money, it's definitely wedding invitations. Then we have spot and process color. So again, we've been talking a lot about this. On a bid sheet, it's commonly indicated as 1C for one color to 4C or even 5C. So, and then front and back printing. So 1/0. 1/0 means there's one color on the front. That means one color. That doesn't mean blue and black, because that would be two colors. Black is considered a color. So one color on the front, and then there's no printing on that back. So that card I was talking about that I designed, that clear card, that is a 1/0 job. It is just the cyan spot color on the front, no color on the back. Or 4/0, 4 colors on the front, no printing on the back. So that was another way I could have possibly done that. If I wanted to do multiple colors on the front, but no printing on the back, because it's a clear card, it would show through on both sides. So it'd be a little confusing. Or 4/1, 4 colors on the front, 1 color on the back. And some people, when they think of 4 colors, they think, oh, so I can only pick 4 colors? 4 color printing means, you know, CMYK. Putting together, you know, any of your images, those are CMYK. You can have a full spectrum of colors because they're going to break it down to those 4 plates. 4/4, 4 colors on the front, 4 colors on the back. And then 5C would be your 4 colors plus a spot color. So that could be Pantone, your Pantone color. You definitely want to consider the equipment and the cost limitations when it comes to, you know, picking these types of colors or picking any color. You know, there's definitely costs that go along with it. A 1 color job on the front, no printing on the back, is probably your cheapest option. However, this would be your most expensive option, adding in that Pantone color, because that requires your printer to get that Pantone ink. And guess where it has to be gotten from? From Pantone. And they don't give it away cheap. So you need to really, really consider, you know, if you're going to be using specific Pantone spot colors and what that cost might look like. Then we have to look at our different file types. So vector versus raster files. Our vector images, those are resolution independent. Those are your graphics, your icons, your logos. I have should. Logos must always be vector. They have to, because you have to be able to scale them. Raster images, again, resolution dependent. All your photographs are raster images. You can't turn a photograph into a vector image. I mean, you know, you could try. You can sit there and try to redraw an image, and, you know, I mean, it can be done. It's very time consuming to do. You know, think about taking a photo and bringing it into Illustrator and redrawing with the pen tool everything on that photo. That's a whole lot of work. But again, you know, chances are very good you're going to need to educate your client on what types of images you need and why. And sometimes you might just have to do a quick demo for them. You know, let's look at this right now. Let's look at our Aqua Excursion logo, because that is definitely, you know, the best example I can think of right now. This is vector, which means that it's going to scale no matter how big I need it to be. It's resolution independent. It's just gonna scale. It'll be fine. So I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna bring it into Photoshop real quick. And I'm gonna make a raster version of this logo just for my demo so you can see. You can see what I mean and why it is so important that we keep these logos vector. I'm just going to even bring it in as pixels and do a file save as. I'm going to go into week 3 and I'm going to just name this logo demo.psd. And I'll name this same, I'll even save this same file in the same exact place. And I'll call it logo demo.ai. And I'm going to go into InDesign. And I'm going to make a really large document. I'm making a billboard. So my billboard's going to be 40 inches by, I don't know, or 120 inches by 40 inches. So a ginormous, ginormous file. And I'm going to place both logos the size I need them to be. So first I'm going to place my AI file, and I haven't resized it. I'm going to place it this large. And maybe I'll make a new page, and I'll put my other logo. And click my facing pages. There we go. Let's see. Let's make this even bigger. There it is. My ginormous logo. Vector logo, I should say. Perfect. I'm going to make a copy of this. And I'm going to place my PSD logo in as well. Ooh, we can already see. Look at that pixelation that's happening. I'm going to make a PDF. And name it Logo Demo. And we'll look at them in Acrobat and see what ends up happening. So my vector logo, which clearly when I created it is only, yeesh, how big is this? This isn't that big. It's only about 7 inches by 3 inches, so not very big. It's definitely not, 120 by 40 inches. I just made that 40 inches high. However, look at what happened with my other logo. Look at how low res it's gotten. Oh, you can just see all that pixelation happening. Ooh, those fuzzy edges. Not crisp and clean like my vector logo stayed. So that's, again, you're gonna have to explain that to your client, why it is that you need, certain files a certain way. They don't understand. They don't do this for a living. That's why they pay us. So again, make sure that you have the correct file for the correct job. And if they haven't given you the correct file and you need a vector file, you're going to need to probably recreate it and charge the customer for it and let them know, like, hey, we can't send this to press this way. It's not going to work. We need to redraw your logo and save it as a vector file. I will, once I redraw it, you can pay me for that, and then you'll have it for your files going forward. You'll be better for it. I'll be better for it. We'll all be better for it. And then, your printed piece will look that much better. And again, when it comes to those raster images, those photographs, make sure that the same thing can happen with a photograph. What if we have a stake photo for our menu? Let's download this. Again, just a little thing that you can show your client. I'm going to change this to 300 dpi. So it's 10 by 13. Change it to CMYK because I'm printing it. So we'll save this as, we'll call it stake high res. And then what if we have it was only, let's resample this to, it was 72 DPI, but it's only 5 inches high by 6 inches at 72 DPI. That's the biggest that they had. Say okay, and I'm gonna say steak. All this will low res. And we'll go back in. Delete our logos, but we can change our file a little bit. Maybe our height is 14 inches and do 10 by 14. So I'm going to place that first steak, my high-res steak. There we go. Looking good. And then I'm going to make a copy of this. And I'm going to replace it with my low-res steak. I can already kind of see the difference. Make sure it actually replaced. Okay. And again, I'm going to export a PDF. I'm going to call this steak demo. And here's my nice high-res steak. Here's my low-res steak. You can see, let me zoom in a little. You can see how crisp the image is here. Like, look at the line work and how, ooh. See what happens when it gets low res. You really lose that wonderful definition going on here. So again, that's why you want to make sure that you have the right file for the job that you're trying, that you're trying to do. So here's another example. You know, those raster images, JPEGs, PNG, TIFF files, they need to have the proper resolution for the output. The resolution's going to affect the quality of the image and the file size. So again, for print, 300 DPI, dots per inch minimum. Here's a good 300 DPI, 6x4. Look at how nice and clear this is. But look at what happens at 2 by 1.5, 72 DPI. If I try to scale it up to the same size, oh, I can't even, look at that beautiful definition of all the different colors. The swirl of colors on his hand here. It's just, everything's getting lost when it gets low res. So again, you know, this can vary depending on press, size, paper type, and the image itself, but too low of a resolution, it's going to affect the quality of your image, which is going to affect the quality of your printed piece. It's not going to look professional. It's not going to make you look good as the designer. It's not going to make your client look good. And that's one of the things you really want to stress with them, because sometimes they don't get it. You know, they don't understand why you can't just use this picture from 10 years ago that they took with their cell phone. You know, it's so great. And you have to explain to them, like, I'm trying to do the best work for you. In order to do my best, I need the best quality images. And let's try to see if we can recreate that photo and make it better. You know, try to solve the problem for them. All right. So again, if it's for the screen, 72 DPI is just fine, or PPI, pixels per inch. You know, this can depend whether you're going to use 72. You can put 72 to 94. Honestly, you're not going to see that much of a difference. The difference is in the load time. So again, it can depend on the screen resolution, but too large of a file will affect loading time, which most of us use our cell phones for everything these days, or our tablets, or what have you. You know, unless if you're home you're really not getting onto the computer for something. So you want to make sure that things are going to load as quickly as possible. So, but again, you also need to still be aware of the size, even if this is just for the web. You know, the 6x4 72 ppi, this looks as good as my 6x4 300 dpi, you know, on the screen. So you want to kind of be aware of that. If it's still too small and I'm making it larger, I'm still gonna end up with a low res photo. So again, appropriate image resolution is one of the most important things that you need to be aware of for a professional printing project, or even a professional web or screen project. You need to be aware of your resolution. Also, make sure that all of your portfolio pieces, when you're sending them up to your Behance, that those have the appropriate resolution. Again, you know, make sure that you are putting your best design foot forward for yourself and for your client. All right, so when it comes to software and files, you know, PDF files, they're pretty much the standard for print job submissions. But we know that we use everything, right? When we're putting things together. You're never just in InDesign or just in Illustrator or just in Photoshop. It's, you know, I call Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign the trifecta of Adobe for a reason, because you're constantly using all three of them when you're putting things together. You know, we use Photoshop for our image editing. We use Illustrator for our vector designs, for our logos and graphics. Sure, can we do vector stuff in InDesign? Yes, but personally, I feel like the tools just work a little bit better in Illustrator, because Illustrator was created to do that. And same thing with InDesign. Can we technically do a layout in Illustrator? Sure, you technically can, but it doesn't work as well as InDesign, because InDesign was created to be the program for that. So again, InDesign is that combination of text and images. It's superior for double-sided and multi-page documents, and for packaging those print-ready files. And then Acrobat also has some pre-flight capabilities of its own with the PDF files. Acrobat lets you check things, which is important. You know, we definitely want to be able to check stuff. So, you know, you can go in and search the tools and hit, you know, just start typing in for pre-flight, and it's going to tell you what's going on here. It's going to analyze everything. And already, document images on the CMY plates, color image at 300, overprint off. What's my summary? Seem to have an error here. Object uses spot colors on black. Object is white is not true. Interesting. Resolution. My resolution's off, that much we know. So again, it definitely told me that there's something going on here. We can close that. I mean, we can check our output preview to make sure that we don't have any weird colors. This will show you the different plates. Like if we want to look at just what's going to print on the cyan plate, the magenta plate, the yellow plate, and the black plate, you can kind of see how this is how they would come out of the pre-press department on the actual metal plates. This is what it looks like. It looks like each plate looks like a black and white image, but that's how much, the darker it is how much black is going to be laid down on the press. This is how much yellow is going to be laid down on the press. You can see there's a lot of yellow in this image. This is how much magenta, and this is how much cyan. And putting them all together, when you lay that much ink down, that's how you will get your 4-color photo. It's really interesting to stop and look at that. All right, so your week 3 assignment is to design a trifold this week. And I actually have a great demo that I am going to show you. So I'm going to take us upstairs. We're going to get out some trifolds that I have, some takeout menus, because again, I said most people probably have a whole lot of trifolds in their house ready to go. So I am going to bring you upstairs and we'll take a look at some of my takeout menus that I was able to scrounge up to do this quick demo. And I want to show you how you need to interact with your trifold and how the folding process is and why it's important to get one out before you start your assignment for this week. So that way you understand how a trifold is folded, how a user interacts with the different pieces of the trifold. And it might be important if you don't have any takeout menus to get a piece of paper. I'll show you how to fold a piece of paper to make a demo trifold. And that way you can start to set this up correctly in design, and ensure that everything ends up in the right place and again, just starts to come together in a professional manner. So let's go upstairs and we will take a look at the different trifolds. All right, I wanted to do a demo on some popular trifolds that you have probably seen, and you probably have some right in your house, right in your kitchen even. Does everyone have that one drawer where you put all of your takeout menus in? I know I do. It happens to be right under here. So I grabbed a couple of good examples, I think, to show you, to illustrate how a trifold is folded and how that barrel fold seems to be used most often when we see a trifold. So I have 3 examples here of 8.5 by 11 menus that were folded into a trifold. And then I even have 2 examples here of 11 by 17s, which were again folded into a barrel fold and in a trifold. And they were all, sent via the mail. Or actually these ones came via mail. I think I picked this one up somewhere, and I might have picked these 2 up somewhere. But I can even go into some of the problems in the printing and things you need to watch out for, kind of a don't do what they did. So let's look at the first one. What we're gonna do is we're going to unfold it and we're gonna turn it back into that 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I'll move these ones out of the way for the moment. So here you go. You have your 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Make sure I move back so you can see it all. And let's say that we turn our paper so it is landscape instead of being portrait, because that's how we're going to set up our trifold. This is the easiest way to set it up. So you may notice that this is the cover, which is in the right-hand column of our trifold. And what it does is it folds in, this part folds over, and then the cover folds on top. So the easiest way to figure out how to set up your trifold is to really sit there and work with one of the menus. Really feel it. Feel the way that it's been folded. See the way that it's been folded. Interact with it before you sit down to design your trifold for this week. So again, let's open this all up and let's really dissect where things are located on our trifold. So right-hand column is the cover. Middle column is the back of the trifold. And then this is what we refer to as the inside flap. Then when we go to side 2, we just turn it around and it goes right in order. Column 1, column 2, column 3. But it isn't until we start to do things like this, folding that inside flap panel of side 1 over, that we can see how somebody is going to interact with that menu or interact with your trifold when they're holding it in their hands. And then again, folding the cover over the front. So when they're first holding your trifold, they see the cover. If they flip it without opening it, they see that center panel, which is on side 1, which is the back of your trifold. If they open it up, what they see is the first left-hand panel of side 2 next to that inside back panel, which is side 1. It isn't until they open it up all the way that they will then see panel 2 and panel 3 of side 2. So when you're going to try and set up your own document, sometimes I find that it's best that I take a blank piece of paper and I just start to label things where they need to go. You know, and I start with side 1. And it might help you to go get yourself a takeout menu that's folded the same way that you want your piece to be folded. So I'm just gonna draw on my plain blank sheet of paper. I'm gonna make myself 3 columns, just like my InDesign document's gonna be, 3 columns. And I'm gonna label this side 1, and I can flip it over, can do the same thing, just roughly sketch out 3 columns, label this side 2, and flip it back to side 1. So I know that this far right hand column right here, this is my front cover. So I'm going to label this front cover. I know that this middle panel right here, this is going to be the back of my trifold. So I'm gonna label this back panel. And then I like to refer to this far left column of side 1 as the inside flap. And then again, side 2 is pretty easy. It's just column 1, column 2, and column 3. And the reason why I label them ahead of time is it makes it easier for me when I am trying to put together my InDesign file to see where things go. So I can see that, you know, I've set up my 8.5 by 11. I've set it up as a horizontal, not as a portrait. I have 3 columns here. I'm gonna have to add a gutter in to my 3 columns. I know that my front cover needs to go all the way on the right-hand side. My back needs to go in that center panel, and my inside flap needs to go on the left. Then when I go down to page 2, I have column 1, column 2, and column 3. They just go in order. And what I can do is I can start to fold things. So I can fold my, my plain white sheet of paper that I grabbed and just do a really quick fold here. And I'm gonna fold it in like a barrel fold. So I fold the front cover over, open it up, and fold the other side in, just makes it a little bit easier. So I can see front cover, back panel, open it up, inside flap, column 1, column 2, and column 3. Now, why does that matter? You may be wondering, and you're noticing that I'm really paying extra special attention to this inside flap and where that's located. Sure, it's really important that the back panel is where the back panel goes and the front cover is where the front cover goes, because if you set up your trifold with your cover here and your back here, this is what it's going to look like. They're going to open it up to the back. They're not going to see your front cover until they open it all the way. That's not how you want somebody to interact. That would be as though it looks like this. Trying to think of how I can show it to you on an example. But you can see it wouldn't be set up correctly. It needs to be set up with the cover all the way on the right-hand side. So again, why am I showing it to you this way? The reason why I wanted to make a big deal about this, and especially about where the inside flap is located and how people are going to interact with it, is if you have something on your inside flap here that doesn't really seem to make sense showing up against the column 1 of side 2, it's gonna read weird. Also, let's say that you have a design that spans 2 columns, which you can totally do with the trifold. Would you want to span these 2 columns, knowing that when somebody opens it up, half of the design is gonna be missing right away, it's gonna be covered? Or would you rather span these 2 columns so that way when somebody opens up the full design, it opens up to this nice design that runs across those 2 columns? And I actually have an example of this, of how this one was set up this way. So here's a pizzeria in my area. Here's the cover. Here's the back, which has, you know, their locations. Again, really, you know, they really thought through the way that this is laid out and how you're going to interact with it. When you open it up, you see your starters, which makes sense because most people would start with appetizers, salads. If you just look, flatbreads, and then the desserts, beverages. But then when we open this up this entire way, I see the different pizzas, which are both together on these panels, and this spans the 2 panels. It would feel a little weird if it spanned the 2 panels here and it was cut off by this flap covering it. So they really thought through how I'm gonna interact with that design. So I can take away this panel right here, and these 2 pages still work together as their own, you know, as their own design, the pizza design. And then the starters, the salads, the flatbreads, the desserts, again, you know, nothing from this panel runs up into this panel where it's being cut off by this page covering it. So it's a really good design, even though this is clearly just a computer printout, and they spared some expense with their printing. And honestly, they probably have better versions of it now. This was from the first week that they opened. I think they were just trying to get their menu out there quickly. But you can see it's a really good layout that they have here, even with the poor print job. And this is definitely home printer paper. I can feel it when when I'm holding both pieces. This is another one with you know, an 11 by 17 design. And again, front cover, well designed. The back cover is the mailing. So you can see how they've set it up and it can be mailed. It has the postage paid up at the top. It has the return address. And then they're actually using the rest of the space efficiently to put in, you know, their party platters, things that you're probably not going to order when you go into the menu, into the restaurant to eat. But if you want to have catering done, it's a good place to put your catering, is on that back panel. When I open it up, again, I start with salads, then they move on to sandwiches, and it even tells me, start here. Look at what we have. Here's our starters. And then again, you open this up and, you know, this design feels the same when the panel is closed. And then opening it up, this design between these 2 panels feels the same. So again, really well thought out layout. And this is a good printed piece. This has a good heft to the paper. There is definitely a bleed happening. It's, you know, we have a good margin here where the text isn't running too close to the fold. So this is another well-designed piece. And then my last one is my other 11 by 17. This one doesn't span 2 panels. But again, you know, I don't think that their layout is as good as the other 2 that I just showed you, but still you have, you know, your front cover, which has all their pertinent information, the mailing label on the back, and they kind of give you their kind of a brief, abbreviated version of some of their best sellers on the back. So maybe that's not that bad of an idea. And then when you open it up, you can see all of the rest of the items. So there seems to be some duplication going on here. And I think that, you know, it would have been nice to see a label saying that these are some of their best selling items, because after a while you can figure out that's what they were trying to do. But again, oh, these are their lunch specials. This is where it got a little weird. Never mind. I think their lunch specials started here and ran up into this column. So that might be why the prices are a little bit different. So again, yes, it says lunch tacos. All right, so again, you want to make sure, you know, that that's not happening. That, you know, this is side 2. Side 2 shouldn't be running up into side 1. If anything, I would take the information from the lunch specials and put it all together, all of this information right here, I would move it in here. So it can, you know, you can run it amongst the 2 pages here. Again, so that's where you really need to start thinking out your layout, because it can get confusing for somebody interacting with your piece. I have used this menu as an example in this course multiple times, and this is the first time that I'm noticing that the lunch specials run up into the other column. And it looks like, even though it's technically not on the same, they're technically on the same page, it looks like they're on 2 different pages, because I really have to kind of flip it to figure out what's going on. So again, really be aware of how you are laying things out. And then I just thought that this one was a good example of, you know, setting up your files correctly and what happens if you do not extend your backgrounds to the bleed. You know, this is, you can see, you have that white border here, not a good printed piece, not centered vertically on the cover. So another thing you know, you want to be aware of. This is kind of off-centered. We have this column, because it's not set up correctly, is right on the fold. So, and the same with the back panel, right on the fold. So you're running into an issue where your text is getting so close to that margin, the margins are so off that it's not folding correctly. So again, something to, you know, to consider when you're putting these pieces together. You want to make sure that you have everything set up so when it gets to the folder, it's gonna get folded correctly. And when it gets to the printer, it's going to get printed and cut correctly. Because I've explained this before, when things go onto the machine, they get all stacked up like this. You have sheets and sheets and sheets of paper being fed through, and it's just a big machine that comes down, and it basically does this. It says, and it puts a fold here, and it puts a fold here, and it grabs a whole stack of them and it folds them all at once. So your inside, you know, the ones right on top are gonna have a nice crisp fold. The ones down at the bottom, it's gonna start to bend a little bit more because you have more paper there. They're not doing an individual sheet at a time. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you start to get confused how to put this together, get out that blank piece of paper. Get out an example of a takeout menu. If you don't have any takeout menus at your house, just stop by a restaurant someday on your way home and ask them if you can have one of their takeout menus. Chances are good that it has a barrel fold. If it doesn't have a barrel fold, you can kind of take it and refold it yourself to be a barrel fold. So, you know, this is going to be the easiest way to make sure that you are getting those trifolds set up correctly. And it's not, you know, it's not really intuition to understand how to set this up. I've been doing this for many years, so now it kind of feels like, you know, riding a bicycle every time I set up a trifold, because I've just been doing it for so long. But I do remember that my first instance of having to set up a menu when I did direct mail, and we do a lot of these with direct mail. And I said, oh, all right, a menu, sure, I can design that. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not quite sure how to start. And they said, oh, it's gonna have a barrel fold. I said, well, somebody's gonna need to explain that to me, because it was my first time ever dealing with a barrel fold. So they went and got me a printed piece and said, oh, this is your barrel fold. And it wasn't until I took it and, you know, again, laid it all out on my desk and said, oh, the cover goes over here on the right-hand side. I would have just kind of started over on the left and worked my way over. You know, it wasn't until I really truly started to interact with the piece that I understood that there really is a specific way that this needs to be set up, so that way, you know, it prints correctly and the customer understands it correctly, and everything else, you know, looks good. So those are some of the things that you're just going to have to keep in mind, you know, until you get a little bit more comfortable putting these together. It's really helpful to keep a visual aid on your desk while you are setting that up. And again, if you don't have a menu, you can take a blank piece of paper, you know, clearly label it front cover, back panel, inside flap, column 1, column 2, column 3. And I sometimes even will take, once I'm done designing it, I will print out both pages, send them both to the printer, and you don't have to even, you know, do a two-sided printing piece. You can take the two pieces of paper, just put them one on top of the other, fold them up, and just see how they interact with each other. Make sure that they interact correctly before you send it off to your customer for proof, before you send it off to the printer if they don't want a proof. You know, you want to make sure that everything's set up exactly where it needs to be. Make sure that when you start to fold things, if your fold's a little bit off, just a little bit off, and you notice your text is running into your fold, you really need to go back and re-examine those margins. So, you know, again, really take the time with this if this is your first time designing a trifold, and make sure that, you know, you have everything set up correctly. That's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to save you a lot of aggravation in the long run, and it'll make your piece look that much more professional. All right, so I hope that this little demo is helpful, and let's get back into what we've been discussing this week. Okay, so as you can see, there's a whole lot that really goes into, you know, putting a trifold together. Not so much the setup of it, but just thinking it through the first couple of times, you know, where different things are going to go. And I thought it might be easy if I went into InDesign and I just quickly showed you, you know, how to set that up, just so you can see what I was talking about with those three columns and where they're located. So let's take a quick look at our assignment for week 3, and we'll set that up, you know, as a 2-page document in InDesign. We're not going to get into everything that's going into it. I just wanted to show you a demo of this. And You know, I'm not even going to get into what the actual sizes and their margins and their bleeds. I'm just going to show you on an 8.5 by 11 because your instructor will get into it a little bit more with you. I just want to do a really quick demo of where things are located so you can set it up and you can, you know, see the different panels and label them accordingly. So it would be 11 by 8.5. You want to make sure you don't have facing pages checked, number one, and you would have 2 pages. And again, this is not the correct size based on your assignment. I'm just doing a quick way to show you how to set this up. 3 columns. I'm not even going to bother to put a bleed. Oh, maybe I am. And it was already defaulted to the bleed. All right. So as I was showing you, you know, when I was upstairs. Here we go. Here's your front cover. Here is your back cover, basically. Here is your inside front flap. I'm just going to copy these. There we go. And then it just goes 1, 2, 3. So really, you know, side 2 works logically, is the best way that I can explain this. Side 2 works logically. Side 1 is a little bit weird to get used to. You got to put that front cover over on the right-hand side with the back next to it in that inside front flap if you want to have a correct barrel fold, which let's go back and take a look at what that barrel fold looks like, which is this slide right here. So here is your front cover. On the other side is your back right here. And then here is your inside flap. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit backwards here. But that is how most takeout menus, every single example that I have up there, that's how they are folded. And there's a reason for that. It's just, you know, most printers have their folding machines set up that way. And when I was showing you how the folder comes down, it just goes right into the, you know, puts a fold here, pulls a fold here. That's why it's set up that way. So again, just make sure that you have your files set up correctly, and that's going to ensure that things end up where they are supposed to be. There's a couple of different demos with the lynda.com tutorials on, you know, just even setting up your InDesign document as 6 separate pages and having it put together that way. You can follow that tutorial. You can see how your instructor shows you how to set it up for this week. But, you know, just kind of be aware of where things are located in order for them to be printed correctly and for things to be put together correctly. All right, let's take a look at our assessment now for week 3. So this week we're talking about making a sign in our assessment, and signage is a really important part of a campaign. It's how we find something when we're looking for the physical building, right? Don't you hate when you're driving somewhere and the sign is just so awful that you almost drive past the place? You have to keep looping around, looping back, and you're like, I know it's supposed to be over here. It says this is the address, and then finally you see this little sign that just doesn't stand out, or the font is hard to read, or it doesn't match the rest of, you know, their marketing material, so you didn't even know it was the place. That is really annoying, and some people will just give up and go home. You don't want that for your client. That's why it's so important to make sure that that signage is done correctly. So You know, it's vitally important for the consumer to be able to connect the dots and find the place that they're looking for quickly and easily. This is, once again, why we utilize typography, logos, and color in a very consistent manner. We never know which two components of the campaign a consumer will put together, so they need to all match. Of course, someone could come into our business by being attracted to our sign, having never seen any other campaign component. Like the brochure and the poster, though, part of something larger, the signage needs to be able to stand out on its own and also have a strong presence in today's busy marketplace. Most places are located, you know, in a strip mall with 30 other businesses, so you want to make sure that they stand out. There are tons of ways to produce signs these days. Some signs are digital in nature, where the visual and the message changes every, few minutes. Some signage includes neon to attract attention, while others are carved in wood. I must say, those are so beautiful, the wood carved signs. The location, codes, restrictions of the county, and the budget are some of the largest contributors to the shape that a sign takes. When creating signage, the reason that a strong, versatile logo starts in black and white becomes very apparent. How would one go about carving a gradient in wood? You wouldn't be able to. There it is. How would we shape neon tubes to reflect changes in tone? We can't. It's just not possible. So having a strong black and white logo to start with is vitally important. Equally as important is having a two-color, utilizing the PMS Pantone matching system, version of the logo. We need to be able to maintain a consistent look and feel while having variations based on application. Pantone colors are considered to be spot colors. So what's a spot color? Spot colors are pre-mixed custom colors. They're not achieved utilizing the CMYK model. And no matter what print shop you go to anywhere in the world, the same set of colors are created, so they'll be the same exact hue anywhere. That's why we use them. So that's why that Pantone color matching system was created, to achieve consistency. And that's why we want to make sure, when we were picking those colors, that's why when I told you last week, start with the Pantone color first. If you can get that one right, then you can kind of go on from there, right? It's kind of, it's kind of hard to say, here's my CMYK, but I can't find a Pantone version of it. So again, make sure that you have a strong spot color. All right, so now this is where it's going to get interesting. All Pantone colors are spot colors, but not all spot colors are Pantone colors. It's not at all unusual for vendors to actually have their own set of premixed colors. Vinyl, for example, comes in several different standard colors, and each one would be considered a spot color. Threads for embroidering logos onto shirts and hats, those also come in standard colors. Those would be considered spot colors, but they're not necessarily Pantone colors. So again, keep that in mind when you're putting files together this week. All right. So when we're creating our artwork, it really is important for us, I can't stress this enough, to understand that if the spot or the process colors are being utilized and what that end result is going to reflect. So again, you want to make sure that you are, doing things correctly, that you are, using the right colors in the right spot. It's such a, I can't stress this enough, that you're doing this. So for this assessment, we need to use those two Pantone colors. We're going to create a sign for the front of the Aqua Excursion building, and the sign's going to be produced by cutting vinyl on plastic and then put over lights so it can easily be seen at night, which sounds pretty cool. And since the media is cut vinyl, no gradients or images can be used, and all artwork must be vector. So you can only use 2 spot colors. And remember, black is a color. Remember that. And our finished sign is going to be 4 feet by 10 feet. But you're going to use Illustrator and scale that down where 1 foot is equal to 1 inch. So what that means is you're not going to set up an Illustrator document that's 4 feet by 10 feet. You are instead going to set up an Illustrator document that is 4 inches by 10 inches. And it's going to be 4 inches high, 10 inches wide. So you want to make sure you're setting it up correctly. Also, you're going to use the Aqua Adventures tagline this week, kayak tour sales and service. So just this information. Don't put Aqua Adventures tag. Don't put in the website. Just put this information and this information. You also want to make sure that you have 2 versions of this saved. You need a version where all the fonts are saved as fonts, and you need a version where all the fonts are saved as outlines. And the reason why you need to do it both ways is you want to make sure that you're sending your outlines to the printer. That's the best, way that fonts aren't gonna fall off. But what if your client has a revision and you changed your fonts to outlines and you don't have your original version? You're going to have to then recreate that. You don't want to have to do that. So again, make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing, taking the time to save things correctly. All right, let's get into Illustrator, make our file. So it's going to be 10 inches by 4 inches. Again, because we're doing inches to feet here. 1 artboard. Keep making too many artboards. You can leave it CMYK, create. I'm just going to close that out. This would be a good time to open up your logo from week 2. All right, so this, whoops, I'm gonna need to find my original one that I had done the last time I taught this. Here we go. And here's my two color version. But you'll notice when we did this in week 2, we colorized this with our CMYK swatches. This time around, we need to use those Pantone swatches that we had. So my Pantone swatches are the top ones. So I'm gonna grab my logo and the 2 color swatches, and I'm gonna copy them. And I'm gonna put them in a new document just to get this all set up correctly. Doesn't really matter the size. I'm just gonna close out my week 2. And I'm gonna select, sometimes you can select with your white arrow, the one blue, and I'm gonna go up to select, same fill color, go to my eyedropper, and I'm gonna eyedrop it and make it the Pantone color. And then eyedrop this one and make it the Pantone color. Delete those and double check and see how I'm getting that dot. So I know it's my Pantone color and it's spot. I've got that tick with the dot. All right, so my logo is now the Pantone swatch. Copy and paste it into my design. And again, you need to think about this design. This entire artboard is your sign. So you don't want to just throw things up in the corner here and have all this blank space. You know, that's what your sign will look like. So really, you know, start to think about, you know, placement of items on the page. You have, you know, you have to make the most of this whole artboard space. Also, another thing, group your logo. If you're not sure if it's grouped, go to object and check. If you can group it, it'll give you that option. If you can't, that means it's already grouped. If you need to scale it, make sure you are scaling it proportionally. Hold down Shift or use the scale option. Go to Edit, or Object, sorry, Transform, Scale. Make sure you're scaling uniformly. You can preview it. There we go. So that way, you know, things don't end up disproportional. And again, add in the kayak tours, sales and service, and the aqua excursions. Each of those items, when you add them in, they need to be colorized with one of your 2 spot colors. So I am not going to really design this because I don't want anyone to follow my design, but I do want to show you how to do the rest of this. So I'm just gonna really poorly center this on the page and make it the blue. Clearly, I would not use this default font if I was really designing something. And I'll go a little bit further and I'll actually center this. There we go. All right. I probably would visually center this because, yeah. All right. So like it said, you need to have a version with the outlines, but which needs to be submitted. But you actually need to save your text version before you make that outline version. So let's take the file name and we're going to do File, Save As. Going to go to week 3. We're going to make a folder called Assessment. And we're going to save an AI file, Even though we need to submit a PDF file, we're going to save an AI file, and I'm going to call this text because I know I haven't turned the text to outlines. And that's saved. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my text that I have here, and I'm going to go up into Type. Where is it? Create Outlines. And see how now I can't swipe and change that text anymore? That is because it's no longer text. I can't edit it. It's now outlines. Once I have done that, I'm going to do a File, Save As. You can name it Outlines just to be sure, and then change that to the .pdf. Double check those files. Open up your PDF in Acrobat. Check the output preview. Again, go to Search Tools, Output Preview. And when you unclick each of your Pantone swatches, everything should delete. If you still have something here, that means it's set up in CMYK and you need to go back into that file and fix it. Fix it first in your AI file, then change it back to outlines, save your PDF again. So both of your files match. Always make sure that you're doing that. Turn them back on. There we go. And one way to tell if your fonts have been turned to outlines, you can actually check that in Acrobat as well. Because if you go to try to select the text and its outlines, you can't select it. It'll just draw this, you know, kind of bounding box. And if it was text, I'll show you what it'll look like. So if you forgot that and you went to, see how I can select it? Because it's still text. That's how you know. Can't select it here. There it is. And then you will submit that. So again, you know, really think about your design. You can't have raster images, like, you know, an image of a kayak, but there's nothing in the assessment that says that you can't have some vector graphics, just as long as they're two color. If you feel like you're good at drawing, or if you want to add, you know, some embellishments to your sign that you think will work, do it. You know, really make this a great portfolio piece. Make it a great piece for your client, you know? So, you know, have some fun with this. Really, you know, really start to work with this design. All right. So I hope that you found this week to be, you know, that you got a lot out of this week. I really, really wanted to really, you know, hammer home how to set that trifold up and how to look at those trifolds and interact with those trifolds. So I hope that that was helpful for you. And, you know, going over, you know, different parts of the printing process and how to put things together. You know, if you ever plan on doing freelance, it's really important to understand the whole life cycle of a printed piece. You know, where to start, what questions to ask. You know, how to start to put together that bid sheet and everything else. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week in our last video, which will be for week 4. And again, have fun with your trifold designs and have fun with your signs this week. Have a great day, everyone.